And to facilitate, we out here want to bring in producer Tyler Wojak. Producer Tyler, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well today. John Marcus said, nice haircut. John Marcus is our director, and I told him I haven't had a haircut in probably 3 weeks. I guess my hair looks good today on camera, so I'm feeling good. Appreciate the compliment.
Hey, man, I get my haircut every Tuesday at noon for this show, so I'm excited about it. What we got on the docket?
All right, so first off, I have to say we did not get a ton of listener-submitted questions this week, so I hope that everyone watching and listening will be a little bit more active for the mailbag episode next week. So we'll start with a question from you. You asked, is Oklahoma headed back to the college football playoff?
I don't see why not. I mean, the performance they put down against Nebraska told us a lot. Number one, they are efficient, and they're better defensively than they have been in the past 5 years. The thing that I would take away from the offense is that Dylan Gabriel still has not thrown an interception this year, and they start their conference schedule off with Kansas State this weekend. I expect it to be smooth sailing up until they play Texas, which might be for a spot in the Big 12 championship game. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like what I've seen from the Sooners so far. I like Brent Venables, and I think it's been really impressive how this team has sort of embraced his identity and what he wants for a football team. I'm still in a little bit of a wait-and-see mode, though, because so far this season, Oklahoma's opponents have combined for just one win so far. That was Nebraska's win over the Fighting Hawks of North Dakota. So I'm going to wait and see until after the Red River game, and then I'll start talking Oklahoma as a playoff team. Is that fair?
No, it's not, because Notre Dame is bad, and Ohio State ain't beat nobody but Notre Dame.
Whoa. This is about Oklahoma. You said Notre Dame, not me.
How many combined wins? That's all I'm saying. If we're going to use the combined win tally, let's use it on everybody. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. That's fair enough. All right, let's get to our first response, though. This one comes from Germs. Germs says, yeah, let's wait until I assume Germs is an Oklahoma fan. Let's wait until we actually face a team with both a good offense and a good defense before we make that call. So this is an Oklahoma fan seeming to pump the brakes a little bit. How do you feel about it?
I feel like we ought to take a page out of Michigan's handbook and just say why. I mean, more on that later, but I'm changing how I view conference schedules, because I feel like I'm just making myself look lame here for wanting good college football to be played in a non-conference schedule. And really, that ain't what it's about. But I understand what he means. He doesn't want to get his hopes up, because frankly, all we do is go to the college football playoff and then get waxed, or go to play a game that I no longer remember that we lose in double overtime in Pasadena. But, I digress.
Yeah, the selective amnesia there. I appreciate that. Now let's move on to the next response. This one comes from Andrew Holskin. Andrew says, I can't make a case for somebody other than them to have that number 4 ranking. They got better with Riley leaving and Brent Venables taking over there. So I think he has a fair point about not really having any other team to rank higher than them. But what do you think about that second part there, RJ?
I think it's still spicy, man. It's one of the things that has not changed since November of 2021. Oklahoma fans still feel some kind of way about Lincoln Riley heading to USC. And I think it's sort of unfair at this point to say that they got better with Brent Venables. They're a different football team, and their strengths are different. They're much more balanced on both sides of the field. But look here, man, he started undefeated. And frankly, outside of that Houston game, that's 2016. So that's not even 2017. We're talking about Lincoln Riley getting off to a very fast start too. It's really just 1 or 2 games here and there. And Brent Venables is going to have his share of 1 or 2 games. It's about how Oklahoma fans are going to react to those 1 or 2 losses that he may or may not sustain this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's certainly spicy. And as a college football fan, I have no affiliation with either team, although I don't like USC. I pretty much said so on this show because I'm a Notre Dame fan. But I want those 2 teams to play this year or next year, just sometime in the near future when this sort of pettiness and spiciness is at an all-time high. But that's a good segue to our next question here. This one comes from you again. You asked, if USC began Big Ten play in the Big Ten East with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and others this season, how would the Trojans finish? So I'll just ask it to you. How do you think they would finish?
I looked at this because the Big Ten East is 20-1 after non-conference play. The one loss coming Washington, right? Upset. I say upset Michigan State, but the Vegas had them winning that game. And then I looked at, the Big Ten East, which is lopsided. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Rutgers, and Maryland are undefeated. I think a 4 spot is kind of on par with what I would suspect. I know 3 spot, because I'm not sure what I could expect from a Lincoln Riley offense against a Manny Diaz defense yet. That one would intrigue me, but I'm thinking 3 or 4 in there, and it really depends on which Michigan do we get. Do we get the Michigan that's been beating up on everybody, or do we get the Michigan that somehow finds a way to lose a game that they should probably win?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and that actually leads us to our first response here. This one comes from Joel Klatt, who says 4th. Seems a little low.
Joel being verbose in that, but also, yo, hey, 4th, really? Okay. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. I'm guessing that's the order that he might think they finish. But it's also interesting in that we've seen a lot from the offense at USC. And if you've been watching USC football like I have, you're still questioning whether or not the defense has an identity, which is a gripe of Alex Grinch's defense at Ohio State, at Oklahoma, now at USC. They have moments where they feel like they can be outstanding. I'll think of those 3 interceptions returned for touchdowns against Rice, but then you're not going to play pasta every week. You're actually going to have to play some of this pretty damn good from time to time. And Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State this year, pretty damn good. So I'm thinking he's not out of line there at all. I think that's actually a level-headed take, which is Joel, right? Quintessential Joel is to be level-headed.
Yeah, Joel, friend of the program. Really quickly, while we're on the topic of USC, I feel like I need to address something because I saw it in the comments. A couple weeks ago, I may or may not have said that USC would definitely lose to Notre Dame come November. That was before Notre Dame lost to Marshall and before Tyler Buckner suffered a season-ending injury. So I might end up being wrong there. Big of me to admit I could be wrong. But anyway, I think USC is really good. I actually was at their game against Fresno State this past weekend. Their offense can keep up with anyone. So as it pertains to this question, I actually think they would finish 2nd or 3rd, definitely behind Ohio State, maybe behind Michigan like you. I don't know what to make of this Michigan team. But the thing with USC right now is they're 88th in the country in opponent rush yards per game. So far, they've given up an average of 177 a game to Rice, Stanford, and Fresno State. So I don't know how you could do that and be at the top of the Big Ten, but that's just me. Moving on to our next response here. This one comes from another friend of the program, Jeff Schwartz, who says they would never lose. So he's like somewhere in the middle of, or somewhere at the other end of the spectrum between Joel and you and I.
Pac-12 Jeff coming through. That's what that is. That man does a Pac-12 radio show and is from LA. I can understand if there's a bit of bias there, but also Jeff is absolutely making a joke there because, of course, he expects them to be competitive, but no one would expect them to show up and win the Big Ten, although that would be one hell of a story. You also touched on a couple of things there that I think are interesting, one of which is they can't stop anybody from running the football. I was looking at the Fresno State game, right? Jordan Mims quietly goes 15 rushes for 114 yards. Guess what they got everywhere in the Big Ten? Like you mentioned, backs. And you know what you have to do to stop Lincoln Riley, right? People say drop 8, and I think that's just shade. I think if you can hold the football, and that's what Jeff Tedford was trying to do. He just didn't have the offense that was capable of acting out that strategy. You're going to face better competition where they're able to do that, and your defense has to be able to get after it. But that's a fun one that I thought about because, well, at one point or another, I actually had to answer these questions on a show. So I'm grateful to know that one was entertaining to you, if nobody else, Tyler.
It was entertaining to me. And on the topic of Jeff, let's bring up his alma mater, the Oregon Ducks, with a big win this past weekend. And on Saturday, you tweeted this out to your followers. Is Oregon that good, or is Georgia that much better? How do you feel about it?
I think Georgia's that much better because they're just stomping everybody, and it's not even close. As a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, I heard people saying, hey, this would be the perfect season for a 12-team playoff. I'm like, no, this is not that. This is a Bowl Alliance season. This is one in which the voters could probably get this one right, at least at the top. We'll have some consternation, some concern, some misjudgments, some misgivings about 2, 3, 4. We will not about the number 1 team in the country and who ought to win a national championship, because Oregon turns out not a bad football team. Actually, might win the Pac-12 championship. We don't know yet. What we do know is that Georgia stopped a mud hole in an Oregon team that stopped a mud hole in a BYU team that's really damn good, and that should be terrifying to everybody. Shout out Kent State. They get Georgia this weekend. They're 0-16 against the SEC. Good luck to you, fellas. The Golden Flashes. Hold it down for us all, taking that beating.
Yeah, good luck to the boys at Kent State. I will say, give props to Oregon. That was a nice win over BYU. They were favorites, so technically they did what they were supposed to do. But Georgia is just on a different level this year. If you go back to the start of last season, they're beating teams by an average of 33 points a game, and somehow they look even hungrier this year, even though last year is when it felt like they had everything to prove, and now they knocked off Alabama, so now they're confident and they're running on the high. Watch out for Kentucky. It's in Lexington this year. Kentucky's a really hungry team, but if Kentucky can't make that a game, I don't think Georgia is going to have one game where they don't win by at least 2 touchdowns until the SEC championship.
Kentucky made that a game last year too, right? Like that, right? Because like Kentucky had Chris Rodriguez last year.
Kinda.
Made a game. They have, okay. Yeah. Well, hey, look, I'm looking for opportunities to say somebody like you could give Georgia something like a run. And I guess right now we're betting on Kentucky in a way that we're not betting on Florida, which is just fascinating to me. And then we're talking about a loose Georgia. Like, talk about being hungrier. I'm just saying they're spinning the ball. They like Stetson Bennett looks like he expects to win the Heisman Trophy, like he was Bryce Young last year, and not like Bryce Young was Bryce Young last year. That's fascinating to me. I've never seen Kirby Smart with an offense that wants to put up 500 yards a game because I didn't think the Kirby Smart was built to be able to put up 500 yards a game. I thought he would actually puke on the sideline because he's such a defensive-minded coach, just wants to run the ball and stay away from everybody. But it turns out, no, that's just Mark Stoops now because Kirby looked over at Nick and said, if Nick is going to do that, I'm going to do that. And now, again, going back to the top of the show, they have recruited like they can do anything they want. That, Tyler, I wish all of us could recruit the way that Georgia recruits because then all of us would get to feel like Georgia does right now, which is kind of like we are Little League. What is it? Rob Schneider in bench warmers. That is how Georgia feels to me right now.
Wow. Did not expect a bench warmers reference, but I see it. And the only reason I said kinda with the Kentucky game last year is because Mark Stoops was actively calling timeouts with time just like ticking down just so that Kentucky would get the cover. So respect him, but I think it's time we should bring in our first response. This one comes from at CFB Blueprint, who says, kind of like what we're saying here, Georgia is just that much better than everyone. So that includes Alabama. Are you feeling the same way? Do you think there's a significant gap between them and Alabama?
Yeah, because I saw Alabama play Texas, and I think Texas is good. The rest of y'all think Texas is bad, but still, Texas ought to have won that game. Everybody that watches that game says they ought to have won that game. That is the gap, right? Like if the gap, I made this reference on the show earlier in the week. I'll make this reference again. The first 4 spots in everybody's rankings ought to go to Georgia. That's how I feel about it right now. Number 5, Ohio State. Number 6, Alabama. Or interchangeable, depending on where you want to go this year or that year or this week or that week. But right now, it doesn't feel like anybody's getting in Georgia's way.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see to the SEC championship. But I do want to bring in one more response. This one comes from at Ronnie DC9, who says BYU's overrated. Oregon is really good, but teams are at their worst week 1. Georgia was slightly underrated because nobody thought they can reload like Bama after the draft, which they can. The main point I want to focus on here is he said, but teams are at their worst week 1. If Georgia's performance against Oregon was them at their worst, I don't even want to know what their best looks like because that is a terrifying thought.
I go both ways on that one, which is say I understand what he means and that people haven't hit each other, not for real, and have been beating up on each other if they have been. And you're still getting to understand who can do what and how in game environment, game conditions. Matter of fact, Derek Johnson gave this to me when we did our feature in Austin. Said, look, we didn't know that Vince Young was Vince Young until he started playing because quarterback, practice, you don't really know what you have. And then that dude is out there making people look stupid and bad. I'm not so much inclined to say that they will look their worst in week 1 because I know that injuries happen to everybody. Okay. So if you are injured at week 5, 6, 7, 8, you're probably not going to be as good as you were week 1. You're probably going to want to be as good as you were week 1. I think it's really about right now, this first conference week, when we're about to see people at their best and see if they can sustain that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it's always something to consider. They're college-age kids. It's a long season. Maybe one week they get bored by beating every team by 40, and then they only win a game by 17 or something like that. But before we go here, I have 2 questions for you that I want to wrap up with. My first one, and this is Maryland, Michigan, Fox Big Noon Kick this weekend. Does Maryland have what it takes to challenge Michigan in their first Power 5 matchup of the season? What do you think?
they have what it takes, which is saying something because Colorado State, UConn, Hawaii did not. That said, I'm going to let Gray Thompson on the Twitters do my light work here. This is from a quote tweet he had about me talking about Michigan and how much further ahead and what the margin of victory was supposed to be for them. Said Michigan covered all three of their games, spreads that were 45 or more points. Last year, they were 15-point favorites when they played the Terps. They won that game 59-18. This week, it started 3 touchdowns. It's slowly shrinking. For me, I want to know if this game is a harbinger of what's to come from Michigan, because then we kind of get to take them seriously in a way that I've just been reluctant to take them seriously. You go drop 59 on Maryland again, I'm inclined to believe that you can win the Big Ten championship again, because that's how it looked last year. Maryland gives you a game in Ann Arbor. I think we would be within our rights to question whether or not Michigan is a top 5, let alone a top 4 team.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. And Maryland obviously is a great quarterback, but the rest of the team, I'm just not so sure. They needed to come back and win in the fourth quarter last week against SMU, and they looked really sloppy. I think they committed 15 penalties, had 2 turnovers. You're just not going to be able to do that against a veteran team like Michigan, especially in the Big House. So to be honest, even though I agree, I don't really know what to make of Michigan at this point. I think Michigan is going to win pretty easily and even cover the spread, which is, I believe it's 17 right now, according to Fox Bet. So every week it seems like they have another big spread, but so far, like Color of Gray said, they've covered every single time.
I also would like to add a note, as you and I kind of talk about this in texting, but I went and looked this up. Michigan paid $1.8 million to Colorado State, $1.9 million to Hawaii, $1.8 million to UConn, $5.5 million for their non-conference slate. 2 things on that. The first is all of those games were negotiated in the last year, which is another way of saying if you want to get a game on the schedule, you can get a game on the schedule. The next thing to take away from that is only you and I seem to care about that, Tyler. The people that actually root for Michigan don't care that they're beating up on teams that are not even in their league, literally. They only care that when they look up in December, it's going to say 9 or 10 wins, and you can fundraise off of that. While you and I will yell that they ain't played nobody, the fact of the matter is only rival fans and media care that you played somebody. Hence me going, you know what? I'm just going to give up on this whole non-conference angle and the way that I gave up on a 16-team playoff and yelling about how the rankings should work being undefeated, because people frankly just don't care. They just want to win. They want to win week to week. They don't care about what happened last week. They care about what's going to happen this week, and they care about the win-loss column. After that, they can give a damn. So if you're Michigan, you did the right thing, because only I am pissed at you for not playing anybody. Everybody else sees 3-0, ranks you number 4 in the country.
I will say I've seen a little bit more reaction lately because people are kind of like, okay, Michigan starts Big Ten play, and they look back like, wait a second, who did they play? And by the way, you said what, $5.5 million? That's a lot for 3 non-conference games. Now you could save some money playing a quality opponent. Usually that's free. All right, let's move on from Michigan to Michigan State here. Can Michigan State bounce back after the disappointing loss to Washington and knock off a surging Minnesota team?
No. I love Mel Tucker, but no. One, I've been beating the drum for Minnesota in such a way that everybody wants to yell at me for having Minnesota at number 10. They're also 3-0. They also played Colorado, which is one more Power 5 team than Michigan played. But here's one that I really think is fascinating and interesting in the way I'll go with this. The number 1 team in the country in rushing is Air Force. They run triple option. Okay. They got 316 yards a game. You know, number 2, Minnesota at 312.5. That's not a flex bone offense. It's not triple option. It's not option. It's not power I. It's got Tanner Morgan throwing the football, but also more importantly, the best tailback your side national college football commentator doesn't tell you about or tells you not to worry about. Me, Jermaine, is trying to tell you Mo Ibrahim has been on this thing for 3 years. 12 consecutive games of 100 yards or more, and he went for over 200 against Colorado. The way that they run inside zone is unlike anybody else runs inside zone, and you're probably going to get torched by it because I've seen him do it year after year after year, and now they got the band back together. The team that won 11 games had Kirk Soraka, PJ Fleck, Tanner Morgan, Mo Ibrahim. Kirk Soraka took another job. Came back 2022. The band is back together, and they are 3-0 and marching. That is my pick to win the Big Ten West, and I'm sorry that it's got to be back-to-back for Michigan State, but that's just the way it's going to go this year because I just don't see anybody also scoring on that Joe Rossi defense. One day, we're going to look back on this, and we're going to say, yo, RJ was onto something with Minnesota. Maybe not today, but that is where I think we should leave it. Minnesota's favored by 2.5 on the road. Also, you know, the last team that was favored against Michigan State won. I bet against Washington. Washington made me look bad. All right. My thanks, as always, to... Thank you for watching the #1 college football show. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of the best college football coverage in America.